Welcome back to the Mindset Doctor podcast, where I help you change your mind so you can change your life. Today, I'm here with an exciting guest, Rene Rodriguez, who is one of America's top speaking coaches. And he's the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of Amplify Your Influence. He's a keynote speaker, thought leader, and I'm excited to have him on the podcast. Rene Rodriguez, welcome to the Mindset Doctor podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Justin. How are you?
I'm glad to have you here because you are the expert, one of America's top speaking coaches. And I just did a TED talk on how I overcame my fear of public speaking. And the reason I did that talk was because I was getting so many people asking me, or they were saying to me, like, hey, speaking just comes naturally to you. I'm terrified of it. I wish I could do what you do. I'm curious for you. Have you ever had a fear of public speaking, or did it just come naturally to you?
Oh, still do. I mean, the nerves are still there.
Yeah.
I always tell people, imagine somebody who's a good at playing the piano or an instrument or a professional basketball player and saying that, wow, you're so lucky that's natural for you. They
Mm,
would look at you like you're insane because all they can think about is the 8 hours a day for 20 years that they put into something.
for
And
sure. Yeah.
it's a reality of, there are things that we're born with that are uh, talents and attributes. And, some of us have more testosterone, some of us have more serotonin flow. That there's things that can affect us in that way. But leadership, sales, speaking, those are things you're not born with. Those are things that are made and created through training and practice and discipline.
Why do you think people should learn the art of public speaking?
So public speaking it's that big topic, right? And people have mentioned it's the number one fear, depending on which list you talk about. And there's several different reasons why it's important. It also depends on who you are. If you're in sales and you have cycles that could be 6 to 8, 9 months, when you are the speaker, that sales cycle goes away because you've put yourself in a leveraged position where your credibility and everything goes away. And you're just, people come to you saying, when can we meet, versus you trying to chase them down, get past the gatekeepers and that. So there's a time compression that happens. It's also from a reach perspective. If I'm going to be trying to reach 100 people and I only do one-on-ones, that's 100 meetings.
Mm,
Or I could have one meeting with 100. And so there's a lot of psychology that happens when you're that person. It's also anthropology goes into that. It's if you are with a high valued group of people that have choices and you are with them, that means that you have been pre-selected by a high valued group, which means that they know something you don't know, which means you must be high value. And so if no different if you walk into a club or a bar with an attractive female or wife, it's like, what does he have? Because she's got choices. And so the concept of pre-selection is important. If there's an infinite number of choices for speakers, but you've been chosen to be on stage, there's a pre-selection that happens. And so there's a deep psychology of that. Then you've also got the pure sort of reality of all eyes on you, which then brings power, brings visibility, and that brings a sense of, oh, they must be worth listening to. And so there's all sorts of psychology that goes into that from a positioning perspective. But then also when you learn how to speak in public, if you want your message to reach more people, one, the process that you have to go through to have a clear message only makes you better. And so it's like, Jim Rohn used to say, set a goal to be a millionaire, not for the $1,000,000, but for what it forces you to become to be the millionaire. What do you have to change? I told my kids what Dr. Peterson said, which is your goal is to be the most dependable person in the room when I die. And really, why? Because what do you have to have in order for that to be the case? You have to have your money in order. You have to have your relationships in order. You have to have your job in order. You have to have your emotions in order. You have to be a really quality individual. Speaking, same thing. It forces you to refine ideas. It forces you to think critically. It's like writing is the same thing. It forces you to think critically because you got to get out of your head, which sounds great, and onto paper, which like, okay, this is a little bit more work. And then get it out of your mouth in the way that you intend it. It's even more work.
mm. Yeah, and speaking changed my life, overcoming the fear, one, but then leveraging that to grow multiple businesses. So, have you noticed you've been doing this for a long time? Has it even changed now with social media? Because that is a platform to speak.
Yeah, so I've been on social for 13 years, and 10, 11 of those years, I didn't have much of a following.
Mm,
And then we were able to figure out sort of a formula that worked, and that grew the following to, over 1 million followers on TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff. And what's interesting is the amount of weight that people put on the amount of followers you have. And it's fascinating because I had the credibility and the influence prior to social. So you add the social and it becomes more curious to me. Like, hmm, what what difference will this make? And it's gotten me more in touch with the younger audience too, which has been cool because I really enjoyed connecting with people to say, hey, I follow you, I watch your videos. And it's inspiring to me because it's going, okay, so there is an outlet to reach a different audience through micro learning and content. That kind of inspired me to switch even my strategy right now. We're doing 11 episode video series on different topics. The first one was on body language. Second one we're in the middle of right now is on storytelling. And I'm also learning which topics are more mass appeal, and storytelling is not much of a mass appeal. I love the videos. My higher end clients love it. It's not a mass appeal. But I've also kind of let go of the need to be mass liked. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to be authentic of what is my ethos. What is the thing that if you want to learn about me and you go to my social and you click anything, it all represents me. So meeting planners like it and becomes, that, but social has really changed a lot and it's getting me to think. That's the other piece too, is how can I structure a message in under 90 seconds, under a minute, and then still teach something and still keep attention? How do I grab attention in 3 seconds? I mean, it's like, it's like the gym for the brain, trying to keep up with it.
Yeah. And you've been in the speaking game for a long time. So there's a lot of speakers out there, like celebrities, and they'll get a gig because of their clout, but they're not
Yeah.
very good speakers.
hmm
And there's other people that are good talkers on stage, but not very good speakers. Because you mentioned earlier, you need to learn to craft a message. So what's the difference with someone who can just talk on stage versus be a true speaker?
So Bradley, in the back of my book, he's quote, he said, Renee turned me from a talker to a speaker.
Mm,
And so what what he meant by that was, I mean, he's already great on stage. He's already got charisma. He's got stories for days. He's a successful businessman. He's likable, right? And he's confident. He's got a sort of his persona and brand and kind of that, modern day Fonzie kind of is what I call him. But um the speaking was not just talking to keep entertainment and seeing what comes out, but moreover, I need to take an audience from point A to point B.
mm,
It's being influential. Now he has influence. If you follow him, people will, he can put a post out and people will do stuff. But then influence from stage, it might be entertaining. I think he was more entertaining before versus
mm.
when he uses a structure, then he becomes highly impactful and influential. And so that would be one example of doing that. And so talking, and I tell people, your comfort on stage has no indication of your effectiveness on stage. Because I know a lot of people that are very comfortable not being very effective, and they just lack the self-awareness. But then I also know people that are not comfortable at all that move us to want to change our life. They're trembling. They might even be in tears. They're choked up and they make mistakes and they and ah, but we love every ounce of it because it's so authentic and it's moving us and it connects and it's real and the content is usable. I mean, there's so many cool things that can come from that. But now when you combine both, an authentic message with a confidence and a structured way to deliver it, that's a really cool combination to watch.
Yeah. And I love that you love the neuroscience behind it. So I know a lot of people that are speakers or want to be speakers because they want to really move people. They want to connect in a deep way and move them to take action and change their life. So what do they need to have as far as mindset wise going into it and then structure wise to be able to actually transform someone's life from stage?
I think getting sometimes transformation isn't the goal for the person. I think you have to ask the person has to ask themselves, like, what's their lane? Like, what have they been asked to do? If you're speaking for a company, what I tell them all the time is you're asked to be a representative of the company vision, mission, strategy, and initiatives. And how are you going to move those forward? Now, if you're a celebrity, you just might be a draw for an event. So you're not really going to tie into their strategy. If you got Magic Johnson, he's not going to really take time to think about your strategy. He's going to tell you stories about the Lakers and what it was like to play with Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and then how he became a billionaire. But it's going to be kind of his story. And the same is true with, a lot of the other folks. And you get some people who do some minor justifications, but most of the big speakers, they will give you the same talk. So it's like you're buying a movie and it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to change, right? You don't want them to change the movie all the time. But then when you get into speaking for influence and speaking to, with the normal non-mega celebrity, the rest of us, we have to be able to add value. That value isn't determined by us. It's determined by the client that puts you on that stage that is paying $90 a gallon in coffee, several $100,000 in stage and crew and flights and hotels and all the endless marketing dollars and spend and time and energy. Events are big in terms of from that perspective. And if you are selected to be that, that means that you're trusted with that very precious time to add more value than the cost of the event.
Mm.
That's why we can demand 40, 50,000, 100,000 to speak, because we're worth the time in that, right? And so then when you want to transform somebody, one, you have to understand that what's your objective? If you got a half an hour, you're not going to get much transformation. 45 minutes to an hour, better chance. But what are you really trying to transform, or are you trying to create intrigue and curiosity? Are you trying to inspire people to think differently, which then will follow them after the event? Everything that I do is always saying, how does my impact not leave the building when I do?
Mm.
That's what I want to do. And I want them to take the impact with them. And so that's sort of the driving questions that I always have in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I love that impact after the event. So, what are some of the things? Is it the stories you tell? Is it what you're teaching actually in the talk? What helps drive that impact after the event?
Well, I think it all depends on what the audience is and what they are. So to me, there's actionable insight. That's a big one of my favorite sort of two words to put together. Meaning, here's an insight I never thought about that way, and here's a tool to live it. Okay. Well, I want to be on stage. Like my most viral video is me moving into my hands into the influence zone, right? So I move from here and I do here. Even if I'm on this talk, and I might just keep my hands moving because it just keeps the screen alive a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so, what's the actual insight? The influence zone starts right here and moves up here. So as long as my hands are in here, I can use this as a prop and something to be there. I can also have it be a distraction if I'm not careful, right? Moving my hands back and forth. If you're watching this podcast on video, you'll see what I'm doing with my hands. And so hands are part of the visual image that you're creating. They're also our way for us to remember what's going on because they trigger memories for the speaker. Like, why did I point to my temple when I said that? I didn't think about it, but it was just one of the expressive things. And it just becomes a little bit more engaging, which if you're more engaging, you capture more attention. If you capture more attention, you're more influential. So it's this sort of domino effect that happens. And so that's what I mean by creating actionable pieces. And I would say the best thing to do, here's my actionable insight for how to create more transformation or change, is always finish a point, a story, a joke, a lesson with, so what this means to you is this,
Mm.
or the reason I share that with you is this. And so then now you're speaking to what's valuable to the audience. And if you can tailor that message to what the audience is specifically feeling, facing, doing, struggling with, and if it's even ties into the company mission and vision and strategy, all the people that hired you are going, yeah, that's our person. We wanted them. And the audience is going, man, I know what to do with this now. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, I love that. And finish the point and make it about them. Because I've been speaking at a lot of events lately, and there's been some great speakers that tell their stories and make their point about their own journey, but they don't relate it back to the audience and what's
Hmm.
in it for them. So I love
Yeah.
that. Now, when did you get into backing the neuroscience with the speaking and influence?
I was 17.
Wow.
How many years ago is that? I'm 49,
Yeah.
32 years. Phew.
Mm.
32 years ago, my mother had me look around a room and said, what does everyone have in common? I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized, I was looking at skin color and voice and whatever. And she said, no, everyone has a brain. And if you can understand how our brains work, life becomes easier. So I kind of planted the seed. And I remember my first psychology class in high school. I didn't like school. I was playing basketball, but my psychology teacher brought in a magician to talk about sensation, perception, and illusion for visual illusions and how it works in the brain. And I was like, I loved watching the magician. It was so cool. It was so awe-inspiring. And I was like, I want to be able to do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this was class. This is fun. And I found this sort of like thing that just like resonated with me. And I was like, I'm in. And ever since then, I went to school for behavioral neuroscience. I just devoured everything I could. I got partnerships with the co-founders of the Neuro Leadership Institute, universities and other neuroscientists. I mean, it's just been an ongoing, my role though, is how I see myself as an applied neuroscience. How do I take this and take it to the real world where we go? How do I sell more? How do I present better? How do I walk differently? How do I grow my confidence? How do I resolve conflict? How do I communicate better? How do I structure a sequence to close the deal faster? How do I structure a story? There's endless amounts of how do I's. And so that's what I focus on.
Yeah. So, what are some of the techniques people can use if they're trying to influence people let's say in a buying situation, they get the chance to present, to drive leads. What are some of the things that they could do?
Influence is like clubs in a bag, right? So what's the best golf club to use? What do you
The
think the
one that's
best one is?
needed.
The one that's needed, right? And so a lot of people will say, I want that one thing. And we say, well, it depends on the scenario. It's like, you can't have a favorite club because you might love the driver, but if you're on the putting green, the driver's not going to help you much. And if you do, you're kind of forcing something. It's not going to be as effective. And so what we teach is how to assess a situation first. One, you got to develop a tool bag, right? You got to develop a whole repertoire of tools and skills, from listening to self-awareness to emotional intelligence to story structure to reflection, journaling, voice inflection, voice tonality, body posture, sequencing, timing, micro expressions. I can go on. Those are the tools. And then the whole process of capturing your stories and remembering the stories, and then understanding the sequence of setting that frame, delivering the message, and then tying it down to them, and then practice. And once you have those, you set them aside and you go, who am I dealing with? You don't grab a club before you look at the hole.
Mm.
You assess the hole, the green. Where is the green? How far away is it? Big question. Is it straight down the middle? Is it dog leg right, dog leg left? Are there hazards, water hazards, sand traps? Is there a river running through it? Assess the situation before you select the tool. The same way you would at home if you got a toolbox and you go, hey, can you go fix this thing? And I go grab a tool. Well, don't you want to look at what thing needs to be fixed? Oh yeah, probably a good idea.
Right.
You walk into the doctor, it's the same thing. And you go, I'm not feeling good. And the doctor grabs a pill and says, take this. Whoa, would you like to understand what I'm feeling before you start prescribing something? What do they say? Prescription before prognosis before diagnosis is malpractice, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing in speaking. It's the same thing in sales and all of those things.
Hmm. So, how important is storytelling in speaking?
I believe that storytelling is the most important. And the reason being is the role that story plays in the brain. It's a really unconscious, powerful motivator, influencer, driver, but more importantly, construct of reality. So we use story or narrative to construct reality. And if you buy my story, you're buying into my version of reality. That is a really powerful tool. And so a lot of the research says is we're also daydreaming upwards of 50% of our waking hours.
Yeah.
And so why? Well, we daydream to run scenarios. These are stories, fictions. If this, then that, and you run before, middle, and end. Those are narratives. And and then you start making predictions. You have this, your prefrontal lobe is out there, sort of this future simulator that goes out there and makes predictions. And so then now we use those stories, those things to sort of bucket life and understand life. And then we use that as a construct to understand reality. So now there's two times when I'm not daydreaming. One is life and death situations. When there's a gun to my head, I'm not going to be thinking of the future. I'm here. The other time is when someone else tells a story. And the reason that we stop daydreaming is because the storyteller is now daydreaming for me. And so then I go, interesting. And what is the purpose of daydreaming? To build constructs, to understand reality. So if I'm letting you tell the story and I'm buying into the story, I'm letting you into my brain real estate to craft a narrative story to help shift the way I look at the world, my view, my sense of reality. And so if I can tell a good story and I have the right pacing and I have relevancy and I have authenticity and congruency, it is ridiculously powerful. That's where cults were made. That's how dictators were formed. That's why movies are so good. That's why we fall in love with certain leaders over others. That's why, I can go on and on.
Yeah.
It's everything.
And it's so important to remember that as the speaker, because a lot of people think I'm just talking and they're either listening or not. And no, all of that stuff is happening in their brain. If you can tell the right story with the authenticity, all the things that you mentioned, but that sounds complicated for people. Is this something that can be learned?
100%. Influence is a science and it can be learned. And so when you understand that we can start with your body language. And by the way, so many of these things are things that we've known. Stand taller, shoulders back. Use pauses. Make solid eye contact. Have a slight smile. Open your eyes, like your eyebrows. Like these are what we call the curtains. You don't want them closed. You look stern, but you open them up and you look open. There's so many different pieces, hands open versus closed. I'd be like, hey, I'm super open to your ideas. It's like, I'd love to see your ideas. And so this just from here to here makes a difference. And so one, you got to create feedback loops, videotape yourself, audio record yourself. You're not going to like it at first, but that's how you get in the game. And then you start building from a visual perspective first, because light travels faster than sound. So how am I walking into a room? How do I dress? How am I, and I'm not saying you have to be dressed to the nines, but what you choose matters. And so you can use casual clothes, but if they're crispy versus wrinkly, it makes a difference. And, so then we start looking at all the controllables. And once I have that in posture, what do I do with my hands, et cetera? Then what am I saying? And do I understand the sequence in which that I'm saying? Because there's a sequence to things. Story first. Like the story would be a way of framing, setting the frame so that when my message is delivered, it's delivered under the intention and the meaning that I desire. And then you end with a tie down. So the reason I share that story with you is this. And so then now all of a sudden I tie that down. And so that real simple framework, frame, message, tie down is the framework, but you can learn it. I mean, I do 2-day boot camps and people come in, have no idea how this works and are leaving TED Talk ready. And so it is extremely learnable for sure.
Yeah. Well, so people are listening, they're like, okay, I got to tell stories. I've heard a lot of good speakers tell good stories about other people or things that are going on. How important is it to have your own personal story?
Well, they're all good. It's like saying, do I need a 9-iron or 2-iron or drive? You need them all. And so the third person story is really, really powerful because I can send a message to you, but it's not to you. It's about someone else. And you can listen to the story about someone else without any defense. And if the lesson makes sense, it'll kind of bypass your resistance. So third person story is ridiculously powerful. Personal stories, or we call signature stories, or even core origin stories, are also powerful. So a core story or an origin story is really answers two questions: how I got to where I'm at right now and why I love serving the customers that I serve. And so if I can address the story of how I got to here, the ups and the downs, we need a lot of downs and falls. Struggles is a really critical piece. Don't omit that or you will not connect with the audience. But the realities of the ups and the falls and the ups and the downs, it's also a version of the hero's journey, right? It's like, I rise and I fall and I rise again. And that when I'm able to share that personal story, now that becomes part of who I am so that you can build trust, build rapport, and sets the frame for my belief systems and I'll see if there's a values alignment. Signature stories are stories that are as unique to you as your own signature. They're not typically from childhood. They could be, but they could have been something last week. I was getting in an elevator and this person jumped in. So there's a story that just happened to you. It's like a fingerprint story. It happened to you. It didn't happen to me. And if I can learn to tell that story and then end it with a message, a tie down, so the reason I share that, and so here's why I share that story, or the reason I share that story with you is, but here's why I think that's important to you. Those are all transitional phrases that can go into that tie down to answer the question. And so we can very explicit of how we use the frame. We use a story to be the vehicle of a message. And when the message has been delivered and accepted, then we go, but here's what this message means to you. And we tie it down even deeper.
Yeah. And I hope everyone listening is listening to this over and over, taking notes on that. That's so important. Like, don't brush over the tie down, bringing it back to them. So I love that. Now, one of the things I talked about in my TED Talk is I believe everyone has a message to share. And that's why I want people to overcome their fear of public speaking and share their message to the world. Now, you've coached thousands of speakers. Have you ever had anyone say, I just don't have a message to share? And if
All of
so,
them,
what would you tell them?
almost all of them.
Really?
Oh yeah. You'd be surprised. Some of the coolest people don't feel like they have much to offer.
Wow.
And, in all my keynotes, I'll usually, towards the end, I'll bring somebody on stage and I have a criteria. I said, I don't want somebody who's comfortable on stage or somebody who likes the microphone. I want somebody who doesn't feel like they have much of a story. Maybe they're in imposter syndrome. Maybe they're struggling. They're petrified to be on stage. I want you. And then I'll get this person slowly raising their hand and I'll bring them on stage and I'll tell them, I said, do you give me permission to coach you on stage? They said, yes. I go, can I call out what I see? They say, yes. I said, great. I'm going to ask you 3 unfair questions. You're probably going to fail and then we're going to fix it. And I smile and they go, okay. And I'll say, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? And they'll answer very obediently. My name is so-and-so. I am a this. And what makes me unique is I care about people. And so they answered very robotically exactly what I asked. And it was not influential. It was not powerful. And so then we take a different approach to say, okay, so instead of answering those questions, because that's what we call the question trap, when you most people don't put much thought into questions that they ask. Would be part one of that. Part two is that we feel compelled to answer questions that are asked of us. And then part three is the person asking the question is leading. And so when we put all three of those together, I feel compelled to let somebody lead me down a path that they didn't put much thought into. So we have to unlearn that urge to answer any question asked and instead maybe begin with a frame. And so I say, okay, so what makes you unique? And that question is a back door to someone's values. It's a mind hack to get past the overthinking. Like if I were to tell you give me two words that make you unique.
Me, ooh, that's hard to answer about yourself.
Yeah.
It makes me
First,
unique
first words that come to mind. You can always change them.
that I want to make a significant impact in the world.
So impact is important. What else? Another word.
Um, Experiences. I love quality experiences with quality people.
So value, quality time,
Yeah.
right? So would you say that impact and quality time are values of yours?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So see how we asked that? Now we got to that. We didn't have to go through some long exercise. Now, why do I want to know that? Because I know that the values, according to science, are formulated in the brain between the ages of 9 and 13.
Mm.
And so then I go, okay, so if those two values were formulated at that young of an age, I want to dissect that time era, that time period, who was around and what happened, because those are the core origin stories that make us who we are. And who we are really is a subset. It's a cumulative piece of our values that we act upon, what we believe. That's the who we are. What are your values? And so if I can understand what makes you unique and it tells me the story, now I know where the origin of those values come from. And those become really powerful ways to open a talk. I remember when I was a kid. And so go back to of being impactful and you said impact and quality time between ages 9 and 13. Who comes to mind for you? And were they what we call a lighthouse, meaning they were the beacon of light? They were the role model? Or some of us have very powerful influences, or what we call foghorns, people that were the opposite. So if you said, impact, there were people that just didn't really think about impact outside themselves, and they were selfish and they didn't really think beyond any, they were just kind of 9-to-5ers. And that was my foghorn. I didn't want to be like that because I know what that feels like. So I decided to become the light where I saw darkness. So which of those two words speaks to you the most?
Well, speaking of like the person, I would say my dad comes to mind in that
Mm-hmm.
because he was an entrepreneur and I would spend like the summers going to work with him and watching him do his thing. And that ignited this entrepreneurial spirit within me. So he's one of the most influential people that sticks out from that time period.
So perfect. So now we have a clue. You gave me a few bullet points, but you didn't give me a story. And so what I would say is when it talks about impact, tell me a story about your dad and how he was a lighthouse for impact and creating significance in the world between the ages of 9 and 13 when you were there. Tell me a story. And the story would be explicit detail. I remember when I was coming in and we were sandy desert. Tell me the story.
Yeah, I remember when I was 12 years old, actually, my dad's a video producer here in Nashville, and I got to go behind the scenes and meet the country music stars. He took me to an event that I got to go backstage with Brooks and Dunn.
Mm.
And before Brooks went out on stage, he was playing his guitar backstage and he comes up to me and he goes, "Do you know the score of the LSU game?" And I remember just thinking, like, I was this kid in shock, like this guy's about to go on stage, and I'm just sitting here, like, and he's asking me about a football score. So things
Yeah.
like that was just such a cool memory for me. I was like, man, I just want to have more cool experiences in life. It's not about being on stage and all the he was going out to play. Like he took the time just to ask me about a football score. So for me, I want to have more memorable experiences like that in life.
So how do you bring creating memories for other people and experiences for people into your business now?
Great question. Probably why I struggled with public speaking for so long. Like I had anchored in my mind that it wasn't for me. I almost failed a speech class in college because I had a panic attack during my speech. And it anchored in the thought of public speaking is not for you. You need to leave it to people like Renee who could just get up on stage. But I kept feeling this feeling inside of me that I have a message to share. So I think that's what really drove me to overcome my own fear of public speaking so I can be a lighthouse for others.
Got it. So but you want to be someone that can now create experiences in the way that your dad created an experience for you. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that's right. Yeah.
And so then now the origin story, if you put all that together, somebody says, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? Instead of saying, hi, my name is Dr. Justin Moseley and I run a podcast. Instead of being sort of obedient, you could say that I remember my father was one of the most influential people in my life, and he was a music producer here in Nashville. And so I was lucky enough to be able to meet some really crazy artists and go backstage and see these things, like the things that everybody dreamed they could see. I could see those things, and I'll never forget going to see Brooks and Dunn backstage, and one of the guys was coming up, and I'm going, I can't believe he's going on this big stage, and he looks at me and goes, "Hey, what's the score of the LSU game?" And here I was thinking, this is the biggest moment of my life, and he's just worried about a football score. But how cool of a memory was that? And that my father was able to create that for me. And so when I got into business, one of the core values that we believe in all my businesses is that we want to create an experience for the customer. We want to create experience for our business partners, people that we work with. And so one of those ways that we create experiences is even having a podcast, because we can feature people that we believe in. We can create an experience and something, maybe give them the exposure that they deserve. Because honestly, what drives me every day is that I want to make people feel as special as my father made me feel through the experiences he created.
Mm,
So now we just
there it is right
recrafted your
there.
story without having to answer verbatim the stupid cliched questions that I asked you before. I got a chance to know you, your history, your father, how you got here, why you love serving the customers. I mean, it answers all the questions.
Right, right. Wow, that's so cool. And that reminds me, so one of my friends, Virgil Herring, mentioned that
Mm.
he had just like a few minutes with you and you took him through this process that was a game changer for him. So was it something like that that you walked him through?
Hmm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, Virgil's such a cool dude. Like I think he's got such a unique way of taking people on the golf course and things like that. And he's a great storyteller. I think what people find when they see what I do is that it gives them a structure for what they already believe and kind of know intuitively. And they go, that's why what I've been doing is working. And I maybe give like a code, a methodology to the intuition in what
Yeah.
they've kind of learned through trial and error. And when you have a methodology, you can do not trial and error, you can do more explicitly and get the results quicker and more on purpose and more repeated.
Mm. Yeah, and I hope people will really dissect what you did with me right there, because I think one of the experiences we all have is being in a room and somebody makes you stand up and say who you are, what do you do, and a lot of times it is the cliche answer, and sometimes for people that's terrifying. That's one of the most terrifying positions they're in is, hey, I struggle with speaking. Now you're going to make me get up and say who I am. In those situations, what's your advice for somebody to be more memorable when they're introducing themselves?
Yeah, I think that it depends on how much time you have, but the methodology still works, is to choose one message and start with a story. And if you can tell a story first, now you might only have 30 seconds, but then you got to say, okay, well, what's my objective and who's my audience? And you're not going to deliver your entire value proposition in 30 seconds. That's the biggest myth when it comes to elevator speeches.
Yeah.
Your goal is to buy another 10 seconds outside the theater, or outside of the not the theater, outside of the elevator. And then the next 5 seconds to buy another minute. And then maybe it's just to buy time that people want to exchange cards. And then you have a different time, but you create enough intrigue for the goal at hand instead of this unattainable goal, which is to deliver, 20 years of value in 30 seconds. It's not going to happen.
Mm.
And so it's really getting clear of what's going on and what story can you share. And a lot of times it might be as simple, and instead of saying, "Hi, my name is Dr. Justin Moseley, and I run a podcast called whatever you want to call it, whatever the thing. I'm the mindset doctor. You can go whatever you want." Instead, saying, "I grew up with a father who was like this way," and you tell that entire story. And I realized that my father had a very distinct mindset about how to look at life, and I decided to really go after it. And that's what brought me to get my doctorate in. And now I'm known as a mindset doctor. And so it's like, oh shoot, it's like it brought me full circle.
I love it. And I've never heard that position that way with the elevator pitch. It's not about the 60 seconds in the elevator, it's buying the extra time outside of the elevator. That's
Hmm.
so powerful. Now, and it's so cool. I was telling you before we jumped on here, I just met Mike. I was out in Vegas shooting a podcast last week. Mike, I'm having dinner with him, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm in Renee's mastermind group." And I was just at an event with him, and I sat with Brian Covey, who's another friend of mine. So it's cool, these little circles. But tell the people, I know Brian speaks very highly of you and your coaching. So did Mike, LaShawn Merritt. There's a bunch of friends in my circle that love your coaching. So where can
All
people
good
find
people.
out about your 2-day events, mastermind, what all that you do?
Well, I mean, one, if you follow me on Instagram, learn with Renee, and Renee is one E, Rene. And I do a video a day. We're doing this video series right now where we do 11 parts. The current one we're in the middle of is 11 lessons on storytelling. And So that's a great place to sort of keep up with the content. There's no sales pitches there. You can click on the link and learn about us. We have a monthly mentorship program. It's more like a coaching and training program where we do two webinars a month, and I'll bring on people like Coach Burt or Flex Lewis or um, whoever, and that's a really powerful piece. But then, of course, I do these 2-day intense boot camps at my house. I do those once a month, where 8 to 10 people will come to my home and we'll walk them through. LaShawn's been through it. Um, Coach Burt's been through it. Brian Covey's been through, I think, 3 times. Mike Hajar's been through it. So a lot of people, all the people that you mentioned have all been through it, but it's because it's a small intimate group, I get a chance to meet the person where they're at. If they're already a skilled speaker, then we raise that level. If there's somebody who's never spoken, we're just going to get them on stage first, get them to get their story. If they feel like they have no direction, we get them direction. But they still learn the speaking, the body language, and the sequencing, and they're getting filmed. And so there's a lot, and I'm doing real-time feedback and real-time correction. So the intensity is really high. It's which is what makes it as life-changing as it is.
Yeah. So for people listening, who is a good fit to do that boot camp with you?
The anybody, sales professionals, business owners, people that are looking to grow their true influence, not become an influencer. That's different, but to really grow their influence on how do I. People I've had personal trainers come through this, housewives that want to be better with their kids and just have clarity on where they're going. I've people that are assistants that come through it. There's a higher price tag, so it's not an easy one to get into, and they sell out fast. But there's anybody that's looking to grow their influence, and I can't imagine a profession that doesn't need it.
Right.
That's the reality of influence. We all need it.
Yeah. Because, communication affects everything around you. So, we'll drop all those links in the show notes. What final piece of advice would you like to leave with everyone?
Well, that's a great question, a broad question. I would say that remember that you have a story. That is the reality. We all have stories, and there's no room for comparison in the storytelling game either. Because I know people that have been through the worst stories, they've influenced me. I've heard people that have gone through, if by comparison, much less stories, have the same influence. Because the story isn't so much about how dramatic and how crazy it is. It's about, do I buy into who you are? Do we share a set of values? And is there a lesson in there for me? And we all have the capacity to do that. We just have to think differently and stop comparing your story, your skill to someone else, because polish does not equal influence. Congruency does. And if you're congruent in your voice, your tone, your body, and your message, it's a really powerful combination.
Love it. And make sure you check him out on Instagram. He puts out tons of great content, or TikTok as well. And yes, follow him. We'll put all the links in the show notes. So Rene Rodriguez, thank you for being on the Mindset Doctor podcast.
Thank you.